During conversation this week, somebody pointed out to me something quite interesting. It says, after the Holocaust, unfortunately, many, can't say percentage, but many of Holocaust survivors have rebelled, have given up on Judaism, have given up on quote-unquote God. October 7, which is termed, and sadly so correct, the greatest tragedy, greatest massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust, has caused just the opposite. Why? So before we share with you a story regarding that, let's say Tehillim for the miracles that we receive and for the ultimate miracle that we're going to receive, hopefully, surely, today still. So chapter 100, Mizmor l'Soida Orila Adonai Kol Haaretz Yivdos Adonai B'Simcha Bo Elef Anabir. No. The Uki Adonai Hu Elohim Hu Asanu V'Lo Nachnam V'Tem Merisa Bo Yishor B'Soida Chatzroisa B'Sila. Hoidu Rebachu Shemoi Ki Tov Adonai L'Olam Chazdoi V'Yad Dor V'Dor Emunasoi. Let's give some tzedakah. And especially when we do it together, it's a very powerful moment. And Lech Lecha. Let's go. So I want to share with you a story which I came across from a fellow by the name of Danny Weiss, who writes for the Ami magazine. And he writes the following conversation that he had with a woman by the name of Daphna. Daphna was a cultural director of a kibbutz. Kibbutz Re'im is one of the kibbutzim that unfortunately was severely destroyed and its inhabitants murdered, etc. And she was actually also one of the organizers of the Nova Festival. So he visited this kibbutz and she showed him the charred buildings, the charred houses, and where her mother and her entire family was murdered and burned. And then he asks her, and what happened to the synagogue? Was this destroyed? And she says, actually no, wasn't even touched. Wow, he says, what a miracle. She says, no, it's no miracle. Unfortunately, we didn't have a synagogue in this kibbutz. And then she goes on to share the following. That Daphna was kidnapped, was held as hostage after them having murdered her entire family. Daphna herself was one who was continuously involved in creating programs, unifying Jews and the Arabs living close by. Unfortunately, she says, when there was a team of Yeshiva Bachim basketball players who wanted to come and have a game together, she would not allow it. Let's keep distance from those Haredim. Now she finds herself, and actually this game was supposed to take place 5 days before on Chol HaMoed Sukkot, 5 days before the tragedy of Simchat Torah of October 7. And then she was kidnapped. And while she was held by an elder Arab, Hamasnik, she spoke to him and she says to him, why do you have so much hatred towards me? I spent 20 years in creating programs, putting us together, your community with my community. My kibbutz hosted you guys constantly. We will drive you, we will help you. Why do you have such contempt for me? Why do you torture me so terribly? And she says, we're cousins. And then he looks at her with his derision, with his hatred, said, we are not cousins. You are not descendants of, as he said, Ibrahim. You're not a Jew. You're a European colonialist who stole our land. And she says at that moment something stirred and broke in her. She realized she dedicated her life to unify, to reach out to the Arabs when they do not even consider us as a Jew. And the reason why He didn't consider me as a Jew because I did not consider myself as a Jew. When I would travel in Europe, she says, they asked me if I'm Jewish, I would say, no, I'm an Israeli. And she concluded, on that day I lost my family, but I find myself. And I promise, when we rebuild this kibbutz, the most magnificent building in the entire kibbutz will be the Bet Knesset, to identify as a Jew and not just as an Israeli. Lech lecha. God says to Avraham Avinu, go to yourself, your inner self. And that inner self is what? That infinite neshama which is waiting and anticipating the coming of Mashiach.